And so we're going to get started with the foreign affairs. Remember that the last time I presented this book, Battlegrounds by H.R. McMaster. The first couple of chapters that dealt with the overall view and specifically dealt with Russia. And today, I'm going to tell you about what he says in the following two chapters about China. And then we'll have time to discuss whether what he said is good and not good, or whatever your opinion would be. So let's get started. The book is a very good one, by the way, and it's in the China chapter starts with the fact that in 1978, Deng Xiaoping opened up China to international commerce, promising a lot of things, promising to play by international rules, promising to open its markets, to privatize its economy, and respect the rights of its people. Well, the intentions, the policies, the things that they have done, the actions of the Chinese Communist Party have rendered all of those promises demonstrably false. And on the other side, of course, the United States, who wanted to engage China. The policy of the United States towards China since 1990 has been, well, wishful thinking, for one, which means essentially the belief that economic and political and cultural engagement with China would liberalize its economy and eventually even the authoritarian structure. Engagement really means talking with them, having meetings, doing things together, this sort of thing. The U.S. policy towards China also had mirror imaging, which means it is the assumption that the people who are being studied think the same way as you do. And also, another characteristic of the U.S. policy was confirmation bias. It is the tendency to interpret new evidence as confirmation of one's existing beliefs or theories. And finally, the belief that others will conform to the U.S. developed script. So these were the attitudes of the United States towards China. And what this played into was that the United States never confronted China about these issues, important issues that have been happening and are still happening, unfair economic practices. We'll talk about each one of these. Technology theft, human rights violations, and the aggressive military posture. So McMaster had a different idea. All this is wrong. The attitude of the United States towards China in the last 30 years or so was all wrong. Not only against China, but as you remember, it was also against Russia, and later on we might see about other parts of the world. So McMaster, it became clear that new assumptions were needed. And so these are the assumptions that he has proposed. China will not liberalize its economy or its form of government. Just won't do it. China will not play by international rules. Anti-dumping, not supporting, subsidizing exports and this sort of thing. China will continue its economic aggression. Economic aggression really means industrial espionage. It means debt traps that we'll talk about a little bit later, and so on. China plans to gain control of strategic locations and infrastructure, such as South China Seas. Remember, we talked about this before, that they are building, essentially building islands in South China Sea. But beyond that, they already have a foothold in many ports around the world, not just China. They have a foothold in Sri Lanka, they have a foothold in Djibouti, and they have a toe in many other places.
Don't they also manage the Miami port?
I think they do, yeah. I think they have a contract. Right.
Port in the Panama Canal.
Aren't they running?
I don't know about the Panama Canal.
Yeah, aren't they running the Panama Canal somewhere?
I think so.
Yeah, and in Greece.
Greece?
Everywhere.
Okay. You all know about it. Okay. They also plan to offer their political system as an alternative to free market economy and democracy. And they're doing that. They're essentially saying, we're a better system, we can do better things. And finally, it co-opts, coerces, and conceals. Now, these are the words of McMaster. The Chinese Communist Party, they intend to retain power at any cost, and that means any cost. They also intend to shift the global economic leadership and geopolitical alignment that is right now with the United States, to shift it towards China and away from the United States. That is a plan that they have. And they plan to create a world tributary system. That means countries may trade with China and enjoy peace in return for submission. We'll talk about this a little bit more. So let's talk about each of these in a little more detail. For example, let's take the retain power at any cost. Well, to retain control, China is ready to and has been doing the co-opt, coerce, and conceal. Co-opt essentially means that whatever you're doing in your job or in your life, it's okay, but now you have to do this additional thing, which is important to the government. For example, employees of companies may be asked to spy. And
Maybe ask the what?
spy,
Spy. Oh,
to
yeah.
spy. That is a form of co-option. Another form is the social credit score. Now, this is essentially a monitoring system whereby the government sees what you do, sees what you buy, sees what you write in your emails, sees what you say in your phone, all of these things, and they keep score. And with that score is that you are going to ask to be given something, like education, or like a job, or insurance, or other things. And, well, you will be rewarded according to what your social credit score is. Now, this program is not in place yet. There are some places in China where it is in sort of a pilot mode, but they intend, in fact, the intention was that by 2020, it will be implemented in the whole country. It is not implemented yet. We'll see about that. Let's talk a little bit about the coercion aspect. The Chinese, they coerce organizations around the world with their economic power. For example, somebody in the Rockets basketball team 2 years ago wrote that he was in favor of the Hong Kong rebels, the protesters. immediately the Chinese government clamped down on the rockets. They would not show their games in the television anymore. They cut off their internet access, and as a result, they lost a lot of money, millions of dollars. And so there was a lot of apologizing from part of the Rockets. And even some players have apologized for this person. He didn't know what he was doing, this sort of thing. Kind of sad. But anyway, it happened. And it happened just a couple of months ago when a player wrote something in, I think it was Thimble or one of these places. He wrote that the prime minister, is a brutal governor or something like that. Boy, immediately the government cut off again all the games, the basketball games, and all the connections, and so there is a real big problem. And now, again, the basketball team is asking for forgiveness and this sort of thing. So this is the kind of coercion that goes on, and you can see it, you can read it in the paper very often.
And a tennis player, the woman, a tennis player,
Yeah.
passed the week
Yeah.
that attacked by a member of the government for.
Yeah, I'll talk about that in a second.
Okay.
By the way, Steve, is this your distillation of what McMaster has to say?
This is the book. This is not me. This is what he is saying, and I'm
It's your distillation.
amplifying with newer data.
Okay, but I didn't see that in the chapters on China, but
Yes, I am amplifying with more recent examples. Okay. So, did you notice that there are no movies from Hollywood that criticize China? It's a big market. And
You mean now?
how about that
Well,
one
Because of
movie?
the opium.
That one
war.
movie,
One
that
of the
criticized
in
North
China.
Korea.
Yeah.
You know, they came down hard on that, on North Korea.
that's right. There was a movie about North Korea, and China did not like that. And I don't know what they did in that case. But
Yeah, the North
No, they-
Koreans,
They came down on Hollywood. hard.
the North Koreans hacked Sony and disrupted
Yeah.
Sony.
North Koreans hack Sony. That's correct. Yes. Anyway, so that is the
Which is China.
the coercion aspect. And the concealment, they conceal the truth, they conceal information from the public. And one of the examples is the person that you mentioned, Mary. What is her name? I forget her name. A tennis player
Yes.
who made it open. She put it on the open that she was attacked by the former vice prime minister, I think, sexually, and she disappeared. She disappeared. Now she appeared again,
Yeah.
but that was because the whole world was claiming, that they produce her, and so she's out in the open again.
It's Peng Shuai.
Feng Shui, right?
But the tennis world, Women's Association has suspended all tournaments in China.
The whole tournament in China.
Including the championship, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless
But anyway, she's out in the open again, this girl, this Chinese.
like Jack Ma.
Okay, let's go on. Any cost would also mean potentially invading China.
Taiwan.
China. Taiwan, sorry. To create a diversion from internal problems, or just because. We'll have to see about that. It turns out that Taiwan is a thorn on the side of the People's Republic of China, because it's a successful democracy. And
because it was Chinese,
yeah,
you know.
well, it's the fact that it's a successful democracy debunks the concept that is very often cited by the People's Republic of China, that the Chinese people are poorly suited for representative government and individual rights. That is their explanation of why they need a communist party that is essentially a dictatorship. And the other reason, of course, is that the Chinese dream is in Taiwan. Their per capita income per year is higher than Germany's, and certainly higher than the People's Republic of China's. So any turbulence that occurs in China, you watch Taiwan, they're in trouble. So something serious happens in mainland China, the way to get the attention away from that might be Taiwan. All right, so let's talk about a little bit more about the goals of the Chinese government for the external goals, the international goals. That is the shift of global economic leadership and geopolitical alignment towards China instead of the United States, and the creation of the tributary system. The strategy to achieve these two goals are these three things you see here: Made in China 2025, Belt and Road Initiative, and military-civil fusion. Those are three programs that are being implemented in China today. The main objective of Made in China 2025 is to develop key technologies. Artificial intelligence, aerospace, electric vehicles, 5G communications, semiconductors, biotech, and many others. And the purpose for that is to free China from foreign dependence, which is healthy for them. Secure the market share domestically within China, so that there will be a very healthy economy in the country, and of course also to capture foreign markets globally. The specific strategy to get this to work, according again to H.R. McMaster, is obtaining intellectual property through leonine contracts, through hacking, through spying. The Belt and Road Initiative is a massive infrastructure development strategy. It's worldwide. You might have seen, you probably have seen a map like this. The red are roads, the blue are shipping paths, and so they're developing or have developed a lot of this already. It also includes the passage through the Arctic. They have started to do that already. I don't know if they have done a complete trip from China all the way to Amsterdam to Rotterdam, but that is in the plans as well. And furthermore, they're really all over the place. They have offered to build a train from Port of Santos all the way to Callao district, which is next to Lima. It seems that it won't be done, but they have offered to do that. And they have trains in Uganda, they have trains.
We lost the audio, Steve.
Many other places. Railroads, rather, not trains, railroads. So, for the Belt and Road Initiative, China co-ops countries with debt traps. Now, what does this mean? Well, they go to a country and they say, we're going to build you a port or a dam or something, and we'll provide the money. And usually it's a very large amount of money with sort of leonine repayment aspects.
There's a lot of people too.
High interest loans.
high interest
Yeah, and a
loans.
lot of the key jobs go to Chinese.
The jobs go to the Chinese and many other, not so nice contract issues. Anyway, so the countries then accept this either because they're convinced or because they're bribed, and they get into debt. These usually or often are not pay, they don't have the resources to pay back. And then the strategy of the Chinese is that they will ask for an equity in the payment, in lieu of the payment, or a contract to run the whatever they have built, the railroads or the ports or the dams. So that is the debt trap. Military civil fusion is another program whereby they encourage the educational and private sectors to develop, invest, manufacture military equipment. And the way to get this done, McMaster says, is mainly through espionage. This is industrial espionage. So the Chinese Communist Party views freedom of expression as a weakness to be suppressed at home and exploited abroad. It also views free market economy as a weakness because their centralized economy is far better, they claim. And notice one thing, on November 14, Biden and Xi had this virtual meeting. And so why was it right on November 14? Why not before? Well, it was after Biden signed the infrastructure bill, because that was the way of showing China and the rest of the world that, yes, democracy does work. The Chinese Communist Party also views the rule of law as a weakness, and there is an example again with the tennis player that sort of disappeared all of a sudden. So the conclusion of all this analysis by McMaster is that the United States needs a new China policy. One that would change engagement, simply talking and being together, or competition. So what does this really mean? Well, it means getting tougher with China. No longer just interact in a cultural thing and trade and politics, but act as a true competitor and counteract, and this is the important word here, counteract the unfair practices, the technology theft, the human rights violations, and the aggressive military posture. So in order to change this policy from engaging to competing, the United States must expose Chinese bad deals with foreign countries. The bad deals like the one in Ecuador, for example, they built a dam that doesn't work. Expose Chinese bad methods and agents. Countries that are sort of fighting not to accept a certain contract, people are bribed. This is known. Crack down on China's theft of technologies. See, the contract that they propose to any company that wants to operate in China is that they have to give China intellectual property in one way or another, and so that's the only way that they can operate in China today. Delist Chinese companies from the stock exchange. There are hundreds of Chinese companies in the stock exchange today. This is an interesting proposal.
Of course, China's doing a lot themselves too.
Yes, that's right. Defend democracy and democratic institutions. Well, he talks about this mainly because the Chinese, by offering their own system as opposed to democracy, makes it important that we defend the system that we have, because they are attacking it in many different ways. Interact with the Chinese people. Well, what that means, according to him, is that we ought to give more visas to Chinese university students, because they come here to the country, they know how democracy and open economy operates, and when they go back, well, they will remember that. Also, contact expats. Expats who live here, give more of Chinese expats citizenships, so that when they go back, you know, they can tell people and they can come back to the United States again and not and be kidnapped there. Also, he talks about improving private military interactions in the U.S. This must be something very specific to a general. He claims that the system of purchasing and ordering is very complicated, and so it would be good for the nation to make it simpler. Legally pursue Chinese actors such as Huawei. Huawei, you know, this is the communications company that have provenly done some bad things. For example, spying in Ethiopia and others. In fact, one of the top managers of Huawei was arrested in Canada, and the United States has asked for extradition. I don't know what that is.
She was released. She's released, yeah. She's
She was released. Okay.
And the two Canadians that were held hostage and threatened with execution were released immediately thereafter.
We ought to ally ourselves with other countries, and specifically he mentions the Trans-Pacific Partnership. This is the one that Trump got us out of it. He's all in favor. Help companies complain against China in the World Trade Organization. Well, it turns out that any company is not powerful enough to withstand the pressures of the country, China as a country. So he claims that if we help those countries and give them backing, these companies, in the disputes in the WTO, that will help our cause. Threaten to remove China from the World Trade Organization. That's a biggie too. And finally, encourage companies to disengage from China. Don't go there. It's too complicated. It's not worth it. So at this point, I'm going to stop, and we'll start the discussion part. This is what the chapters 3 and 4 of this book they present. And, well, some people may not agree with what he proposes, may not agree with some of the facts that he alleges that they're facts. So we're open now then to discussion. Yes. Will you pass the microphone, please?
Well, you know, is this working?
That's probably
Probably not on.
I think a lot of Americans that help facilitate this, you know, to save money, they shipped all the jobs to China, and then they let themselves lose the intellectual property. So I think part of it has been self-inflicted on us. Now all of a sudden, now we're caught in a situation where it's coming back to roost. You know, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and we find out that we can't get, we couldn't get medical equipment because it's all being done in China. That's the other one that I just heard of recently. You know, as we keep touting, we're going to go all electric. And it turns out all the battery technology, or at least the material to make the batteries, is in China. So they're going to control the battery technology, and we're going to be caught short there too. So I just think that we need to be, I agree with you, we need to be more aggressive, and we need to look out for the interests of the United States.
Can you pass it to Ed, please?
Yeah, I have quite a few points, but my overall criticism, which I say last time on McMaster, is he thinks too much in terms of military type solutions, which are not really a viable option. So on several issues, like Taiwan, the basis of Nixon and the opening up of China was the U.S. recognition of the one China policy, that we accepted that Taiwan was part of China. So how can we say, on the one hand, that was the basis of our relationship, and on the other hand, say, well, we don't accept that? So it would be like, if some French holding like Fiji, and they wanted independence, and we supported it and expected the French to say, bien sûr, go ahead, take it. It's ridiculous. Now, is the United States willing to go to a nuclear war over 24 million people that are who we recognize as part of the same country that we're going to try to prevent? I mean, is the United States willing to sacrifice 100 to 150 million people for that? I think that's an absurdity. On the other hand, the Chinese will try to, I have no doubt, try to take over one way or another that piece of what they see as part of China, which historically it was.
Yeah, but there was a discussion of that point between Biden and Xi.
Right.
And I think Biden said, "Don't go into Taiwan," and Xi said, "You get out."
Yeah. So I think that is going to be a very significant point. But again, the question needs to be asked: to what extent the United States would be willing to go. Secondly, one thing that I criticize McMaster for is looking at the CCP, the Communist Party, as being a sort of uniform bloc that has one opinion, and a lack of recognition of the shock that the Tiananmen Revolution, Tiananmen Square, we think of it just as the massacre, was to the Chinese Communist Party. It's at that point that a large faction within the Communist Party realized that a continuation of the path that was led by the leadership at that time would, pardon me? Xiaoping, but others. At that time, it was President Hua, Chairman Hua, I believe. In any case, that it would lead potentially to a disintegration of central authority, in which China's history has always been about. That it's an empire in the sense of disparate people, and the still present, ever present, peasantry versus urban areas. You could go back 4,000 years and the story's the same. The peasantry, while their standard of living has gone up a little bit, it's still way behind what the urban areas are. And so President Xi, is an outgrowth of that. And I think he is actually on the verge of giving a shock to the system that the Communist Party agreed to after Mao, that there would be a change of leadership, a stable change of leadership every 10 years. And Xi is changing that. And what some people say will be a key thing to watch is in November of next year, of 22, will be the 10th, they have every 5 years the meeting of the Communist Party. And if there is, they have very strict protocol. So when Xi comes out, the next person is generally, that's the person that's going to be groomed over the next 5 years to then take over. If there isn't one person, but 2 or 3, then Xi is going to continue past the next 5 years. And it could be 10 years, or it could be 20 years. So we all think, everybody's going to lie down and go, that's fine. It isn't fine, because 90 million members, or maybe now 100 million Communist Party members, that's all there is in China. It's not even 7% of the population. They're not going to be in accord with this. It's a system that he's providing a shock to, so that's going to be of interest. The other thing is, he doesn't mention the fact that China has a 247 to 250% debt to GDP ratio today. And that we've already been seeing so far this year through Evergrande, most people say Evergrande, but it's Evergrande, they're stepping in to prevent the collapse of the property sector that represents 33% or more of the Chinese economy. Just trillions of dollars going into real estate. That's a huge bubble. It's people's money, so they can't let it burst. It'd be like saying all the savings banks suddenly went out of business, because they operate differently in China. If developers get your money before they build your apartment building, and take your money for your apartment before they even put anything into the ground. So they're prepaid. That's the way it works. So it's people's savings. So the Chinese government will not allow that to collapse. But what are you going to do? It's so overvalued. That's a big problem for them. The Atlantic had a really good piece about how the whole debt trap thing is just American propaganda in many ways. And they show in the Hambantota port that was in Sri Lanka, that Canadian company that had done a feasibility study, and then others, and then there was a change in government, and the Canadians just said, we can't deal with this, and the Chinese government came out. And by the way, that has been financially restructured, and it's actually making money. So that whole thing was kind of part of the Trumpian, China's eating our lunch and blah, blah, blah. Interestingly, China has 27 firms in the top 100 global construction companies. That's up in 20 years from 9. Europe has 37 global construction companies. That's down from 41. You want to know how many U.S. global construction companies there are? 7, down from 19. Okay? So there's been a diminution of American hegemonic positions in a lot of respects. Now, I do think that, like somebody said, China. China has stolen our secrets, or probably all our secrets, but specifically industrial secrets, primarily by going, if Apple wants to build plants there, the Chinese say, sure, you can do X, Y, and Z, but in return, we want the technology. And multinational corporations just go, okay, we want to give, our primary duty is only to return to the shareholders. That's all it is, okay? Our primary responsibility is for our shareholders to make money, and everything else is ancillary. So, I think it was a disaster that we got out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. It exists today without the United States. It was our idea, and the rest of the Asian countries decided, yeah, this is a good idea to form a bloc against China, an economic bloc. I think, that would be the one thing we should do, but let's not forget, Hillary Clinton was just as against the TPP, even though as Secretary of State, she helped put it together, okay? So it's because the mood of the American people is we shouldn't be involved in these trade alliances, which is crazy, because we cannot go it alone. And that is the mentality more and more that somehow this country can go it alone. Now, I would just finally say that China, under Xi, is already tamping down on free market capitalism. Look at what's happened to Alibaba, which is 5-10 times larger than Amazon. Look at Tencent. Look at these huge tech companies. Yes, they have been. Why? Because they saw what was happening in this country with Google, with Facebook, etc., and saying, this U.S. government can't control the top tech companies, and we can't, or we won't. And he's going, we're not going to let Tencent and Alibaba, etc., dictate to the Communist Party how it's going to go down. But the repercussion of that, I believe, is you will tamp down the capitalist, innovative thrust. And the prediction by many well-placed authorities is that China's growth rate is going to drop significantly, which will add to a lot of economic challenges. And that the United States, unless it screws itself, which is very possible, it's trying very hard politically, unless it doesn't succeed in doing that, that our growth rate will be much higher than what people expect.
Anybody else?
Well, I'd like to, I don't need that. I'm gonna take this down a minute. I'm sorry.
And you have to talk into that so that the people in Zoom can hear you.
Hello.
I pat my booster shot.
Yeah, so have I. Some said I'm a cancer survivor, and I just was in an accident. The doctor said, wear the damn thing. Anyway, so I'm doing it. The first thing I'd like to say is spot on with, 99.9. I take umbrage with a couple of things, and I just want to add it. Let me ask, who in here is military? Anybody a veteran? Okay, so I'm it? Oh, you are? No, I thought I saw some garb. I saw a little Army garb too. Okay. So some of us have fought for the United States in war. I was in the Vietnam War, and I suffer from it today. We won't get into that. But let me say this, America has never been a good nation builder, period. End of discussion. We have ruined, since World War II, many, many, many countries. We have taken a lot of Africa. We have taken a lot of South America. We have cut deals all over the place that benefit us and destroy others. I can take you right now down to Nicaragua and show you what the Chinese have done. I can show you where they're through Central America, where they wanted to cut through years ago and before the Panama Canal was built. Oh no, we've got a better idea. They will spread themselves out all over the place. They are much more patient than we are. We are way too politically motivated. Everything we do is based on somebody keeping power. I mean, think about it. Right now, look at Congress. Look at the misbehavior with January 6th. Let's just, no politics. Just the incident of an insurrection in our own country. And nobody's got the political will because they want to win the election. Everybody wants their money. So as long as money is in it, and we're the big capitalists we think we are, we simply turned everything over to China, including all of our intellectual property, because we were selfish. We wanted everything cheaper. And we weren't going to be able to keep up with it. You're right, we can't go it alone. We didn't go it alone in the 70s. We were falling apart. When the Japanese car entered, Detroit was basically gone. So unless we get along with Pat Grimm and we figure out how to do these things, then McMaster comes strictly from military. He's Pentagon all the way. And remember, why wouldn't he be? That's all he's ever done. And without war, they're not making money in the Pentagon, okay? And they take a huge portion of our budget. So follow the money, listen to what people are saying, but look at what they're not saying. And that's where you really want to be. Because they're going to give you all these pretty things to look at, flashy, But that's not what's happening. We've got to get into China and do business with China. We have to take China to task where we can. But we're not willing to take our own selves to task when we, step on other people, break laws, break rules, do all sorts of things illegal. And lately we've taken the powers of war and just stretched them out for 20 plus years. We moved from one country to another and nobody said anything. Because we're after Osama bin Laden. That's been long over. And look how it all ended. Now you tell me whether that money spent over there in the last 20 years was worth it. Because again, instead of focusing on the ball and over there in the Middle East, paying attention to what's going on, oh no, we're going to we're going to go over there and make friends with people who are going to give us cheap oil. And now we've got, in the whole plan we did with Iran, I dated an Iranian in the Air Force. We used to train them, in the 70s. Now he's my enemy? It's the government. And when you let these things happen, and then you allow Russia, China to fund them. I mean, the whole jihad today is funded by these folks. So I don't have a lot of pity for the stupidity of the American way anymore. We can't do anything anymore. We don't have any tech. Just go right over here to college. See how many are graduating with STEM degrees, science, technology, engineering, and math. Look how this country has acted over real science with COVID. We're in trouble. And never mind that each one of us in this room weighs 25 pounds more than we should. I mean, I'm not picking on anybody. I mean, it's just, we don't control our food anymore. We don't have, these are national, these are international consortiums that, who in this room can grow their own food if they had to? The older you are, the closer you get to it. And if you come from a country away, you might even be able to. So we got a lot of headaches, but McMaster doesn't have the answer. It's a lot more difficult than that.
Can I say something?
Do you know what the most popular restaurant chain in China is?
McDonald's?
KFC.
Okay.
They love it, and they have an epidemic of diarrhea and obesity.
Diabetes.
Now,
Diabetes.
Don't give me diarrhea.
something and you mentioned something that is not in the book, but that is something that is a weakness for China, which is their debt. Their immense debt, 230 or 90, I forget what the number is now.
250%.
At least 250% of the GDP, and China is very vulnerable in that. I have read other books which are here in the library claiming that that China will collapse because of that debt. So here's a question: since McMaster doesn't talk about that as part of the strategy to deal with China, what could or what should the United States do vis-a-vis that problem that China has?
No, I just wanted to comment on the debt trap that Ed brought up, and as you mentioned about the companies, I don't know if China fully controls them, but I know a lot of the projects that we're talking about that they consider debt trap. It's actually Chinese companies that bid these international projects. Sometimes you have more than one Chinese company competing in the bids because there are not a lot of companies out there worldwide that can complete a lot of these projects. And so whenever a country needs to build a huge bridge or what, and they invite international companies to come in and bid, a lot of times you have more than one Chinese company bidding, and then once they start looking who is qualified, most of the time the Chinese companies, they do win.
Do you believe that they win based on their capabilities, or is there a possibility of some underhanded activity?
Bribery?
Right.
Bribery is probably a big part.
Well,
Oh, we
maybe.
did respond to that.
Well,
No, there could be bribery, but American companies, just like what came up last week about cobalt, okay, that the American companies and American policy towards the Congo had everything to do with access to raw materials that used to be uranium, and then it became cobalt, and an American company sold to a Chinese company, okay, and there was no process where for national security, which that really is a national security concern, didn't intercede and say, oh, you want to sell? Well, you got to sell to an American company, or you got to sell to the government, and then we'll decide how to contract it out. But no, it went to the Chinese. Now, I will say that both in South America, Latin America, and Africa, there's increased resentment by the populations where there are these huge projects, because one, they don't hire locals, except to do the worst work. They don't pay, and the safety rules has endangered and actually resulted in huge increase in injuries and deaths, for example, in the Congo, etc. So there is a recognition that the governments in those countries that have approved those projects, that the local populations are really becoming more and more resentful because they have seen no direct benefits whatsoever, but only cost. So it's not that the United States, not as an official policy, but as a supportive policy of American companies who didn't do that different a thing when they negotiated contracts, etc., and were, as an example, because I know about it, in South America during World War II, the U.S. government told Chile and others, you can't charge more than X amount per pound for copper. Okay? Why? Because we needed so much copper. And those countries are going, but that's how we're making our money. Too bad. We're only going to pay 4 or 6 cents a pound back then for copper. Okay? And that price was held. There was only cost imposed on them because the United States government needed all those munitions and so on and so forth. How do we expect countries to feel when we impose our will in that way? Oh, that's fine. We're going to live in these horrible hovels and not improve our standard of living because, we have to support your struggle against enemies that we don't have. They weren't their enemies. Okay? Now, we look at things through our eyes, and it makes sense. But, maybe look at what China's doing through Chinese eyes, which is a pretty hard thing to do. I've been to China. Trust me, I would not want to be living in China for any amount of money. You could give me $1 billion right on the table here. go live in China, and I'd say, that's okay. Because of many reasons, but underlying for all the educated, and it's a pretty big class of people now, you have to be careful about what you say. You cannot just say what you want to say. People who talk about this country being, more authoritarian, blah, 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 they're talking out of the wrong end of their beings. Because unless you've been in an authoritarian country where you have to watch out everything that you say and do, and I think they have instituted this social credit, especially with COVID and everything else that's accelerated, so that if you don't follow, they nail you right away. Just like that. If you cross a road incorrectly, you get demerits on your social credit.
And what's wrong with that?
No, but this is, it's very much an Orwellian society. And the question is, are human beings that different everywhere? Or are we somewhat the same? Now, I don't know the answer to that question. There's a great book written on North Korea by a professor from, I think, Stanford. It was a fictional account, but he's been there many times. And imagine what it's like to have lived in a society for now 4 generations where you can't trust your siblings, you can't trust your children, you can't trust your neighbors, you can't trust anybody, because any one of them, for whatever reason, could turn you in, and you would go to a labor camp, which is sure death. Imagine living that way, not 1 generation, which has happened many times, but now 4 generations, and what that has done to human nature. I don't know if everybody's the same.
That has been done under Stalin or Russia.
Yeah,
They have
but
been
not for,
living like that
not
for
for,
generations.
not 4 generations.
3 generations.
Yeah.
And they revolted. So we can expect.
And many people in Russia today now look back and say, Stalin wasn't so bad.
What wasn't so bad?
Stalin, in Russia. Why? Because it was,
I got several questions though. What rules do China follow? Do they have any rules? Do they have? Is there any kind of a constitution, or every 10 years when they change leaders have changed in the past? But Xi has changed that law now. He's managed to get that
For life.
open-ended, so he can serve beyond that. He can serve for life, really. So do the rules depend upon who the supreme leader is at the time? We have constrictions on the president. The president can't just do anything. He can do a lot, as
they can try.
As Trump proved. Yeah, well, and true. Trump carried this to an extreme. He could lie about everything, and if you called him on it, he would just say fake news and slough it off that way. But do they have any laws to follow, any rules to follow?
Well, there's a constitution.
There is?
Yes. But
We got one too.
there's a constitution, there are rules, etc. But if you get your central committee to agree to change, and then get the party Congress to agree to that change, then the rules change. And that's what they did at the last party Congress. So, you can run again.
So they actually changed it?
Yes. It's not the same kind of constitution as we have, which is, much more clearly delineated. But there was a kind of standing agreement that, after the Mao's death, that they couldn't go through the instability of different factions fighting, which got to be very intense. I mean, people forget that one of the leading the members of the Central Committee died in an airplane accident, you know, in the Gobi Desert. You know, that was arranged. So they didn't want that anymore because, you know, the country at the end of the day is fearful that it could fall apart. We haven't felt that until recently, where possibly the country, for one reason or other, could literally fall apart.
Yeah, this is why they plan to hold on to power no matter what. But I would like to go back a little bit to the premise that since China is vulnerable economically, how should the American policy towards China change to include that fact, to take advantage of it?
Blackstone.
Who wants, my point is.
Okay, I forgot that was your point. So they changed the rules so that now foreigners can, in China, they changed the rules so that as of this year, foreigners can own a majority of a company in China. That's a new rule because they know they need the capital. So what's one of our largest financial companies? BlackRock? Guess where they are? They're pouring more money into China.
What company is this?
BlackRock.
Is that whatchamacallit?
It's the largest investment company, I think, today, isn't it? Isn't it bigger than Fidelity?
Yeah, it's the largest.
Yes, it's the largest.
I thought it was
Disney. You don't see Disney going, oh, we're going to get out of Shanghai and Hong Kong. They need that money.
That's what she said. She
Yeah.
said that it's all about the money.
It is about the money. You know, to me, you know, the biggest question that will be faced in the next 5 to 10 years is whether or not the United States dollar can survive as the world currency, as the currency reserve. Because the moment that stops happening, our standard of living will drop because the rest of the world is holding so much of our debt. We keep printing this stuff, and other countries are swimming in it.
The comment I was going to make, I'll make it brief. You know, there are people in this country who like the Chinese model and are trying to push us in that direction. So, you know, I think we have to be vigilant about that. And the other little joke I had was the difference between us and the Chinese is we all own guns.
Which makes us so much better.
Well,
I don't know about Chinese model. I'd say they want us to be the Oban model.
But as you had said that, McMaster was saying that the Chinese are trying to tell other companies that look at our model and try our way of governing. And maybe it could be argued. The present U.S. model, a lot will argue, it's not like a shining light that a lot of countries, new countries would be looking to and say, you know, that's who I want to model myself off. That's how we want to govern. And, you know, I think I've heard Sarah, I quote her a lot. And I hope I'm quoting you correctly, saying that, you know, both countries, India and China, probably got the same status after was at the same position after the British left. But one country is now much more advanced than the other. And one shows democracy and the other shows another path, which is China. And they seem to be doing a lot better economically.
Well,
I mean, I guess my point is I'm definitely not for communism, right? But what I feel is that we all think
we all are comfortable in what we know. We only know what we know, and what we know is how we live. And as we live in our comfort zone, we're all surviving with problems too. So just as we look at China and say, yeah, they can't figure out their debt thing, they can't do it. Well, that's exactly us. What happens with the authoritative dictator in China? Well, we have a president who takes things out of hand. So I kind of look and I just say, you have a population, 2 billion in China. We have, I think, 1.7 in India. Interestingly enough, it's our communist state that actually functions better with that population. So the larger the population, sometimes to manage the people. And I'm not for communism, but there are times when I sit back and looking in India, when I travel, I live there, I go every year, 2 months, and life is tough. It's not always working in a democratic environment, even though from an ideal perspective, it is a better thing. I agree with Ed, with what he said. I would want to live in a place where I can't say things, all that stuff, but there's a dynamic of population that you cannot manage sometimes. A lot of people with different ideas and different political, all this stuff. And sometimes that's why we can't get things done in a democracy. And it's sad. I would prefer to take the democracy and learn to get things accomplished. But it seems like sometimes the freedom is actually a dynamic that creates its own problems.
The freedom to make bad decisions.
You have the freedom to really choose poorly, and the majority might not be informed to make good decisions, and then that majority might be controlling the decision. So a lot of things like that happen too, that I'm not so quick to jump and say, even with the China, my prior question was now beyond what we talked about, but I was curious because we do focus on China and the GDP and the debt, but when they are actually operating in these other countries and doing work, I was curious to know if we shouldn't be looking at GDP, but rather, what's their GNP? How do they operate? Because that money that they are doing overseas, there's a purpose with what they're doing. And I wonder if even our comparisons, when we look at that, we compare everything with GDP. Well, we're moving into this globalization where, companies are moving to other countries and doing things. That's what we're doing. That's where we've sent jobs overseas, but I sometimes think we're just so sure that we have it that I don't know if it would necessarily work as we'd hope it would work in China now. To give them democracy right now and say, be democratic right now and go for it. I don't know, Taiwan might have worked because Taiwan was exactly what it was.
But you got to have economic opportunity. So let's compare China as an example to India and the economic opportunity among the
you're saying, I guess we're talking about socialism in general, communism. Communism is different than socialism, and they combined, and most people don't know what communism is. But the thing is that without economic opportunity and education, and China spent a huge amount of their energy on that. And frankly, they weren't free to do a lot of things. In India, they were way freer. Where's the economic opportunity? So the places that are more socialist, that feed and help people, of course they're happier and they're more productive because they don't have to worry about that now. But in China, it's different. You've got the whole of the outback, which is the farmers. We call them peasants. They're farmers. And they have nothing but what they can eat off up there. And they're required to go to work every day to feed everybody else in the world. Okay? Economic opportunity, very little, which is why they remain so. Now, every young person that was able to go to the city and get an education lives in the most horrendous environments just so that they can get out. And you're right. China's not going to take it. Nobody's going to put a lid on China. I mean, Pandora's out of the box.
but economic opportunity.
Right, but I'm just thinking in India, okay, we've got opportunity, but we got
You don't have the education and the opportunity together. Comparatively, I'm just comparing the two.
Right. No, but I'm saying
You've got plenty of opportunity.
okay.
If you talk about agriculture, I think there's only like 20% of the land in China is arable. A lot of it's mountains and deserts, and they can't grow enough food to feed themselves. That's part of the problem. And in the United States, we're blessed with all kinds of very fertile land.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment on that. A couple of comments. First, the populations because that's another issue that's not discussed. China is trying to cover it up, but they have a declining population.
Yeah, they hardly.
Okay, they're declining, but they just say it's basically not grown. Okay. And parts of India have developed as much as China has in some centers. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
But to your
Like,
point,
have you lived there?
no, I've seen, I've seen,
I've
you know,
been to
the
United
infrastructure
States.
project and so on. It's not the same as state directed, so it's messier. It's much,
Unbelievable.
yes. To your agriculture question, right now, the Chinese government, to be more self-sufficient, they realize that the agriculture based on old systems is highly inefficient, just like Modi did in India. The difference is, in India, they're going to have to backing off on major agrarian reform, which will break down the whole village community, the whole social structure, everything for modern agriculture. In China, they are doing the same thing and basically taking over individual farmers and whole communities so that they can have these big ag, very efficient farming type communities. The challenge is, what do you do with all the people that are no longer needed? Okay, that is their challenge, but they are going down that path. You know, this country, I don't think would need to worry so much if we took care of the business that we need to take care of here. You know, and by that I mean, if we took care of some of the fundamental political issues and the way in which we are arguing them, etc., and brought back a modicum of workability in our political system, I think we'd be fine, because we do provide the best environment for innovative technology, etc., without a doubt. I would not be surprised if we get fusion power in the next, I know they keep saying it's something that's going to happen 50 years from now, 50 years from now, 50 years, okay, but I would not be surprised if we see fusion as a realistic, that and hydrogen power, which is already being used, but in the next, decade.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very, very much. This has been a very productive, interesting session. Now, for January, the next meeting in principle would be January the 6th. The problem, of course, is that the booklets that we have ordered from Great Decisions will not be available until that week, so it will be too late. So the question is what to do on January the 6th. One thing we can do is just pass and meet again in February. I propose, however, that we could have another meeting, and the topic that I have in mind is a sort of a post-mortem analysis of Afghanistan.
Of what?
Afghanistan. Afghanistan.
That's a light load.
And what I have in mind is that I would tell you what McMaster has been, what his idea is about Afghanistan, and this was, of course, before we left. And Ed, he offered to talk about what happened after we left Afghanistan. So that would be one thing that we could do.
Yeah, the secrets aren't out yet.
Is this something that,
Sure,
you're interested?
that sounds good.
Why not?
Okay, so next month then, January the 6th,
Oh,
zoom in here.
the anniversary, the first anniversary.
The anniversary of the day that lives in infamy, January 6th.
Oh, my
Oh.
God.
Where all those tourists visited
Let's celebrate that we got out of it. We're alive, we're here.
They didn't
Yeah,
burn the Capitol, by the way.
Okay, so we'll meet January the 6th at 1:30, and we'll make this presentation for about 20 minutes, a half an hour. I'll first, Ed next, and then we'll have a discussion again. Thank you very much,
Thank
and
you.
have a very pleasant
Thank you.
Christmas and New
Thank you,
Year's.
Steve.
Okay. Oh, shit, I gotta.
Oh, damn.
Specifically,